Inga iwi, inga mana, inga waka, inga hoe wha, haere mai, haere mai, haere mai. Rau rangatira nā, tēnā koutou. Ka nui ta hari, ko haere mai nau koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā rā koutou katoa. Kia ora tātou, kia ora whānau. Great to have you here as we get underway with this Vision for Aging in Aotearoa, brought to you by the New Zealand Association of Gerontology and Age Concern New Zealand. We're running these every single Thursday all the way through October. This is basically replacing our physical conference that we were going to be holding pretty much at this time. Unfortunately, due to the ravages of COVID, we are changing, obviously, and we've changed into this wonderful opportunity, which is to bring you live webinar. We'd like to say a massive thank you, of course, to all of our sponsors, and in particular, for this particular session we're into, it's the Aging Well National Science Challenges. So thank you very much indeed to our gold sponsor there, and also to our wider range of sponsors as well. Our main sponsor, Perpetual Guardian, Ryman Healthcare, and the Selwyn Institute. So thank you very much indeed. And as you can see on screen, we also have a great range of sponsors and supporters there too. And without your support and help, we would not be able to bring you the quality that we are bringing you live right here through the power of video. So thanks once again for joining us here. We're going to be getting underway in just a very, very short moment here in this space. We're looking forward to right now is our housing panel discussion, and we have an esteemed panel of participants joining us here and an extremely able chair to join us as well. So my role in this particular situation is to introduce our chair, and our chair will introduce our panel members, and we will get underway. We'll have an opportunity further down the track to be able to do some Q&A with you as well. We'll also have some breakout sessions towards the end of the session, and I look forward to some robust discussions as well. And really, this is what it's all about: communication, being able to chat amongst ourselves and to be able to share ideas. I think one of the wonderful things about ideas is, as George Bernard Shaw said, if I have an apple, you have an apple, and I give you my apple and you give me your apple, then we still only have one apple each. But if I have an idea and you have an idea, and I give you mine and you give me yours, we now have two ideas each, and we're able to turn and make that exponential as we share those with other people too. And that's really the ethos and the essence of what we're doing right here today, live via the power of the internet. So I would like to introduce our chair to join us here for the next set of sessions. So our panel chair is Helen Potiki. Now, Helen has strong leadership and governance experience across a range of sectors, including social development and education. She's committed to empowering female leaders, having previously represented New Zealand at the United Nations as a lead negotiator at the Commission on the Status of Women. Helen joined HUD in June 2019 as Deputy Chief Executive, Office of the Chief Executive, and began leading the Housing and Urban Settings Group in January of 2020. Now, prior to her current role, she held roles as Policy Director and Acting Chief Executive at the Department of Internal Affairs and Ministry for Women. She's passionate about making a real difference in the lives of New Zealanders through housing and creating a sense of community. And her leadership approach is grounded in inspiring and supporting through role modeling and providing context, connections, and culture that enable people to do their best work. Helen is of Ngāti Porou, Tapuika, and Ngai Tahu descent, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome her here today. Kia ora and welcome, Helen Potiki.
No rara, kei te tino mihi hoi a koe, Greg, mō tō kōrero mō te hui nei I tēnei ata. No reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Ai, ko Helen Potiki tōku ingoa he uri tēnei no te aroa waka no Ngāti Porou me Ngai Tahu hoka ko te mea tuatahi I tēnā rei mō te kaupapa o kōrero nei. Kia ora, tēnā tātou katoa. Greg, thank you for a fantastic introduction to the session and an introduction to my role here today as the chairperson. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm thrilled to have the privilege to be able to be part of this discussion and chairing and facilitating, as you say, the esteemed panel that we've got here this morning. I too want to reiterate my congratulations to Age Concern and New Zealand Association of Gerontology for bringing this together. It's a month worth of webinar series. It's absolutely fantastic, and we are all thrilled here today to be part of the housing panel. I want to give a special thank you to Stephanie Clare and Jane Fisher for organising and wrangling us over the last wee while throughout the challenges of COVID as well, because this session was originally set up for April, and it's been a pretty difficult slog, I think, for everyone since then. So fantastic. I just wanted to mihi to both of you especially. Without further ado, I do want to introduce our panel members, and then I'll do a quick couple of minutes for everybody that's online here to understand how the session this morning is going to run. So let me do the panel members first. I'd like to introduce Dr. Kay Saville-Smith, the Director of the Centre for Research, Evaluation and Social Assessment, an acronym called CRESA. Now, the most important thing I want to say about Kay is that she has a model train collection and a blog on making pies. And I understand that there's going to be a Christmas train collection edition coming at you soon, people. So look, Kay, if I could extend the session and ask you to talk about that, I would, but I can't. So we're going to stick to the kaupapa for now of housing. Kay, you've undertaken extensive research around seniors in the context of housing markets, housing demand, retirement villages, accessible housing, sustainable housing, the residential building industry and neighbourhood built environments. Thrilled to have you here today, Kay. Kia ora to you. Yvonne Wilson, I'd like to introduce you next. Kai Wānanga, Housing Manager, Te Runanga o Kirikiriroa in Hamilton. Yvonne's a passionate mum of 10 children. She's got 32 mokopuna and 2 mokopuna tuarua, or great-grandchildren. And if you can stake your ground as one of the bosses in your whānau, Yvonne, congratulations, something that I aspire to. Yvonne believes that kaumatua and older people are the best people to identify their housing needs and aspirations, and we can learn a lot from their experiences turning research into practice, achievable and impactful results. The mahi of Te Runanga o Kirikiriroa spans the housing continuum from homelessness through to home ownership. No mai haramai ki tēnei hui nei, Yvonne. Lovely to have you here. Moving on to our panel colleague, Paul Barber. Paul is a Senior Social Policy Analyst, Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit, SPPU, the Salvation Army, Te Ope Whakaora. Paul has worked in the non-profit and social services sector for over 20 years on social policy issues, including those affecting older people. Paul joined the SPPU in August 2019, and housing issues are a key part of their work. Joining us this morning, Paul will be discussing what it's like to be an older person who's renting and what's needed for renting to be a better experience for all. Kia ora to you, Paul. Troy Churton, welcome to the panel. Troy is the National Manager, Retirement Villages and Ageing Workplace Commission for the Financial Capability. Troy has had 10 years of experience leading national stakeholder and relationship management strategies, public-facing education programs, influencing public policy development and industry best practice as well. As part of the housing panel this morning, Troy will discuss retirement village living. Welcome to you, Troy. It's great to have you on the panel. Moving on to our last two panel members, Scott Figenshow. Scott's the Chief Executive Officer of Community Housing Aotearoa. Scott has had 25 years experience in the community housing sector across non-profit, government and private sector roles. He's advanced degrees in planning and housing finance and is passionate about affordable and social housing as part of the holistic approach to the network of housing provision in New Zealand. Scott and I bumped into each other a couple of weekends ago in New World, and I can say that Scott contemplates very carefully the brand and type of milk that he's going to get. I found that quite interesting. It's important to me too, Scott, that I get the right milk. So kia ora to you, Scott. Great to have you along and to see you again. Kia ora. And our final panel member that I'll introduce this morning is Susan Jenkins. Susan, you're the Executive Officer, Abbeyfield, New Zealand. Welcome to you. Susan has a comprehensive professional background in a wide range of sectors, including primary health, social and ethical investment. Education and special education as well. Susan has served on not-for-profit and private sector boards in New Zealand and the UK. Susan's thrilled to be here, like I am, taking part of the housing panel, and what she will specifically be discussing is work done in New Zealand and what we can learn more about the wider context of aging well. So folks, that's your esteemed panel this morning. I will be your chair. This is how we're going to run the session. I have a question for each of the panel members who will take about 3 to 5 minutes to share their whakaaro or their thoughts on that specific question. And then I have a broad question, which I'll come back to at the end of each of the panel members' 5-minute discussions, and give panel members a further 3 minutes to share their whakaaro on that specific question at the end. So it's 12 minutes past 10, people. I'm pretty committed to making sure that we get through everything so that you can all enjoy the richness and the goodness of all of the fantastic thinking and work that's been done by our panel. So let me not hold that up anymore. Kay Saville-Smith, Dr. Kay, I'm going to come back to you. The question that I'd like to pose to you, Kay, to discuss with us this morning is, how does housing contribute to or mitigate age-based stigmatisation? Kay, over to you.
Kia ora koutou. I always hate talking about stigma because I think it's an important thing, but it's also very negative. So I'm going to talk about housing, and then I'm going to talk about stigma. The one thing that we know about housing is that it's at the centre of all our lives. And if people feel excluded from it, or they feel other people are getting access to it and they are not, that becomes a sort of centre for conflict and indeed stigma. Actually, the people that often face the most stigma in the housing market are Māori, Pacific and young people, interestingly enough. Older people are quite liked. They're particularly liked in rental markets or by landlords because they're not seen as difficult tenants, although they are seen as problematic tenants, mainly because you can't keep on raising the rent because older people typically have limited incomes. But what has happened is that housing has become, like retirement incomes, has become a sort of centre of intergenerational conflict. It's essentially younger people and some others argue that older people have had the good run, the golden run at housing, have created and accumulated wealth through their housing access, and people are excluded from housing, particularly owner occupation. And when you actually look at that argument, it sounds okay, and it's a very typical narrative internationally, not just in New Zealand, but actually the real problem is not that older people have had the advantage, which they definitely have, of a supportive investment in housing, including their own, but including government investment over a number of generations, which has allowed them to be owner occupiers. But the fact that younger people have not had that advantage, that we've moved from an owner occupier society to a rental society, in a society that actually treats the rental market as residual. That is only for a few people, but now it's actually probably for the majority. And by the time we hit 2020 or there around, sorry, 2030, 2040, there around, half of older people retiring at 65 at that sort of period, are going to be in the rental market. So one of the things is, I think that we need to really think about how we can see housing as part of social solidarity, intergenerational solidarity, providing and supporting all generations, not just an older person's wealth accumulation. So I think we need to deal with that, and we need to get realistic about that. Older people certainly typically have more advantages by being already in owner occupation, but that's going to disappear into the future. We're all getting old, and also there is the situation that it doesn't reflect selfishness on an older generation. It does reflect our underinvestment as a society, as the successive governments in housing and getting people into good housing solutions. The two things that I think are important in terms of housing, though, that reinforces stigmatization among older people by disabling them. Is firstly the notion that older people need special housing, that should somehow be in its own enclave, and it should be different from anything else. The thing about housing for older people, it looks pretty much the sort of housing that younger people need, particularly children need. And that brings me to our current stock, which tends to be dysfunctional or disabling of people through their life cycle, particularly as old age, because it's not accessible, it's not functional. And New Zealand is one of the few places in the Western world that has, on one hand, a leading accreditation system for functional housing, and on the other hand, legislation which says that in the residential building sector, we don't have to worry about accessible housing. That makes older people disabled within their houses, and that reinforces the notion that older age means that people become less and less competent. So I think those are probably the main things I want to say about that. Thank you, Helen.
Tēnā koe, Kay. Thank you for that kōrero. And we look forward to coming back to you at the end of the session for another whakaaro on that second question, Kay. Kia ora. Without any further delay, Scott, I'm going to hand over to you. Scott, we're interested to hear from you about how does the right to a decent home in the community housing sector help older people?
Great, thanks, Helen. Look, I guess I'd like to start out with everybody, if you could visualize for just a moment, if you've ever been either out driving in either the snow, the ice, or get stuck in the mud somewhere, you know how a spinning wheel won't get you out of being stuck. So you actually make more progress when the wheel moves a bit slower and gains traction. And so I just, as I'll talk about the right to housing, that's the image I'd like for you to have in your minds, because I think we're on the cusp of actually gaining traction on a whole lot of things that can help move us forward. So in 2020, there's a couple good things that actually happened this year. They happened much earlier in the year. We had visits from both Leilani Fahar, the UN Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing, as well as from Rosa Cornfield Mate, who was the UN independent expert on the rights of older persons. And we've been really fortunate to be partnering both with our colleagues at Te Matapihi and with the Human Rights Commission on this work around guidelines on the right to a decent home. So I think we've got an opportunity, and we're all on a bit of a voyage here to understand how a rights-based and a treaty-based approach can actually help us move forward and gain traction. So I think this upcoming release later this year on the draft guidelines that the Human Rights Commission's actively working on, what I've been learning as we've been participating with that work is there's a couple key principles that I think help us make sure we achieve in practice what that right for older persons in particular means. Firstly is, I think a key part of the problem we've had so far is that over the last 30 years, we've managed to lose all of the richness of the funding and investment tools that would actually ensure that we're delivering enough homes that are genuinely affordable, and in particular for older persons. So as I look at my colleagues, Susan and Yvonne here, folks, we've got the models for delivery. We know how to deliver housing that works for older people and a range of diverse offerings for that. What we don't have in place is all of the range of investment ways that work for that. So I think, again, as we look at the guidelines on the right to a decent home, we're all on a voyage. We're all learning what it will mean to kind of put those guidelines in practice. I think the place where we can start applying those is number one, the things we do have to actually work in practice. They have to be evidence-based. So we have that evidence. What for somehow we've managed to do is just not actually do those things that are evidence-based. The Better Later Life strategy is a fantastic start. And I think that's the second piece, is that yes, you have to have a strategy. It has to be encompassing. It currently calls for affordable housing options that work for older people. But unless we enshrine that in law, and that we actually look at some different economic settings, that actually when we prioritize that, it means that the investment actually follows, not in theory, but in practice. we haven't lived up to that. So looking forward to that further work on actually understanding with everyone how we just do more of what we know that works. Thank you.
Kia ora, Scott. Thank you for your kōrero as well. I'm going to come on next to Susan and then Paul, Yvonne and Troy, just so that we know the order of the speaking this morning, whānau. Susan, over to you next. Can you tell us how can rental sharing support well-being? And if you can draw on your experience at Abbeyfield, that'd be fantastic. Thank you, Susan.
All right, thank you, Helen. Yes, I am going to talk about Abbeyfield and just a quick summary of what it is for those of you who are not familiar with it. The Abbeyfield approach is to create a warm, family-style, volunteer-run house that enables older people to live independently in a safe and social setting. What it looks like if you went to an Abbeyfield house would be 12 or maybe 14 older residents, all living under one roof, each one with their own private studio and ensuite, and coming together to share meals cooked by a housekeeper. Now, a few years ago, we looked at some of our statistics about the pathway of residents through our 14 houses. And we found a couple of things that I think were particularly interesting. First of all, that nearly a half of our older residents lived out their life in Abbeyfield. That is, they were able to stay there for the rest of their life. And then of a third who went on to higher level care, they did so about 2 to 3 years later than people living in other housing settings. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But we've also learned from our surveys and from the stories that our residents themselves tell us that they're happier, they're less lonely and isolated, and feel more secure living in an Abbeyfield setting. So, we see people thrive, maybe putting on a little weight, which can be a really good thing when you're an older person, and often coming out of their shell. So why would this be? After all, we know we've heard from researchers like Kay and others that renting in older age is associated with poorer health outcomes than for those owning their own home. And Abbeyfield is a rental model. There's no capital entry requirement, only a fortnightly rent, which is set to be affordable if National Super is your only income. So we put it down, this difference, the Abbeyfield difference, to a few things, and they're quite simple on the face of it. As I said, an Abbeyfield house is a shared living situation, but we go beyond simply sharing the living space to sharing meals. So that's nutritious, home-style meals, the kind of food that people are already familiar with, provided by a cook and housekeeper who is our only employee. Now, many of you here today will be familiar with the work of Professor Carol Wam, who has shown that when older people share their food, eat together with other people, their nourishment is much better. They eat more. So that's quite a simple age-old thing. We've been breaking bread together for millennia. So we perhaps shouldn't be surprised about that. But I think in our case, it's beyond that sort of proven benefit of taking meals together. But also when meals are supplied, there's no need for our residents to go out to the supermarket, buy the food, bring it home, prepare it, clean up afterwards. All of those activities that get harder when you get a little bit older. So this frees up their time and energy for other more life-enhancing things. Our rent is also inclusive of all accommodation costs. So there's no need to attend to those many items, those many details of running a household, from putting out the rubbish and the recycling to paying the bills. Now, the age of Abbeyfield residents clusters around the 80s, maybe the late 70s, and with some younger and some older. But nearly all of them came to the Abbeyfield house having lived alone, in many cases for decades. Many were on that slippery slope of loneliness and isolation, leading to poor health. Where family may not be close or close by, neighbourhoods have changed, and it's not so easy to get out and see friends. All those things that maintain your health through reducing loneliness. And when they move into an Abbeyfield house, as I said, they almost always report an immediate improvement in their health and well-being. It's also worth noting that Abbeyfield houses are managed by committees of volunteers So together with the housekeeper, they take an active interest and an overview in residents' well-being, meet and interact with them. And it's probably no surprise to this audience that most of those volunteers are in the 65 to 74 age group. So as I said before, this enhanced well-being does translate into later entry into rest home level care. And so over the lifetime of an Abbeyfield house, this, we calculate, could be saving DHBs as much as $4.5 million in delayed rest home subsidies. And yet it costs a lot less than that to build a house, around $2.5 million, depending on where you are in the country and the cost of the land. So last week, I was particularly interested in Professor Spoonley's, some of his very sobering forecasts, including a massive shortage in long-term care beds in the next few years. So I think for us, the question is, can increasing housing options for older people be part of the solution to some of these huge problems that lie just ahead of us? And is there a solution already to hand? Scott says there are already proven housing models available. And we agree with Community Housing Aotearoa. Having a good home is the foundation to having a good life. And we would maintain that for lonely and isolated single people, rental sharing in a supportive context can be a foundation for a healthier life as well. Thank you.
And thank you for those very valuable insights of the work of the Abbeyfield House. Paul, I want to come over to you next. What are the issues that trigger rental insecurity? And what would you like to share with us in terms of the groups of vulnerable old people older people in the rental market? Thanks.
Yeah, kia ora. Look, yeah, I chose to focus on this the renting experience for those for people who are aged over 65, because that is a key part of what we need to do to get right at the moment in our housing policy. The group of older renters grew by 44% between 1986 and 2013, and about 19% of the over 65 population are renting, and that's about 100,000 people. And 2/3 of those people are renting in the private market, with the remainder in either kāinga ora or community housing or council housing. This is a really important group of people. The Salvation Army ourselves provides social housing, including for about 500 people, and around 56% of them are aged over 60. And our work at the Social Policy and Parliamentary Unit, we've looked at housing issues and renting issues. And last year, we did a report on Pacifica housing futures, and it really exposed how poorly this is doing, our housing sector is doing for Pacific people, and a really lamentable lack of focus on that area of housing policy. And I guess I was struck too when I read in a survey done for the review of retirement income, where it was said that non-homeowners are almost 5 times as likely to struggle in retirement than homeowners. And if you control for home ownership in the kind of survey outcomes, variables like gender, Māori or Pacific ethnicity, and location don't become significant. So their conclusion from that is that it's home ownership is one of the most impactful ways to reduce financial vulnerability in old age. I guess my reflection in response to that is that it's never going to be the full answer, and we have to get renting right. And certainly in the foreseeable future, the amount of renting is actually going to increase. And so our social policy has to ensure that renting is not a default or definition second class for older people or for anyone. And we really have to figure out how to get a balanced approach. So, I mean, if I just think about addressing those vulnerabilities, there's 6 that I see. I'll just have to rattle through quickly. Ethnicity is the first one that springs to mind in response to those things I've already said. 53% of Pacifica people rent, 40% of Māori, compared to 16% for European. That's across all. That's not just among older people. I didn't have those statistics. There's things like life shocks, the affordability issues, tenure security, the quality of housing and its accessibility that's already been mentioned, and the lack of choice and options for people as currently. So I'm just going to say a couple of things about each of those. As far as the life shocks goes, we're going through the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. The Salvation Army, we were monitoring that, the experience of the social impacts during the lockdown and subsequently. Our services were seeing how people who lived alone, who had been managing, were taken across into needing support, and it exposed one of those kind of vulnerabilities that people's support networks need to be there, and those wanting to provide the support and those not normally needing it find themselves put in a new situation. So I guess it just shows there's an important piece of our social fabric needing to be looked after. Then there are other the psychosocial impacts of a crisis with the pressure on people's finances, issues about mortgages and whether to downsize or whether people will end and have to move into renting, as well as the things that often lead to people ending up renting, like health and relationship health problems or relationship breakdowns and so on, that affect their financial strength. And that brings the focus on the affordability for older people. It's when it's really clear 60% of people rely on NZ Super as their primary source of income. And that's in the context of a great inequality that's growing up, because there's a group at the other end of the income and wealth spectrum who are really getting there's a real growth of inequality amongst older people that isn't so strongly seen amongst the rest of the population. And our accommodation supplement doesn't work very well as a top-up and to help people meet their housing costs. There are various things wrong with it that we could go on about at length, probably. Tenure security is the other biggie again. Older people really value that sense of knowing that they can stay as long as they need to. And most people value that, actually. We've made some changes to our rental laws, but we've got to do more. And there's a lot more work to do, which may be harder now that we've just made some changes. Quality and accessibility, I think Kay and a couple others have touched on that already. But just remembering, we've made changes to our rules around housing quality, but those rules have to be enforced, and we have to make sure we actually get the houses to that level of quality. And there's probably a lot more work needs to be done around accessibility of housing. And I guess Scott mentioned the choice, having the options for people, the different things. If you're thinking the cultural side of this for Māori, for Pacifica people, and different models are needed, and we haven't got the resourcing yet into that area to experience how to make those things work. So I guess that's another one I'd want to touch on in this time. But I guess I'm just wanting to come back and emphasize that balanced approach is what we need going forward, balancing between the home ownership and the experience of renting.
Kia ora, Paul. Thank you to you. Coming over to you next, Yvonne. What are the needs of older people for support in responding to their intergenerational obligations and sustaining their well-being? Over to you, Yvonne. Kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Sorry, we just had an fire alarm going off in the middle of this. Going to try and proceed the best way possible. It's one of the important things that's happened recently is that the Building Better Homes, Towns and Cities has funded some research around some of the Kaumātua village buildings work as the Kaumātua Housing Toolkit that works through the needs of our kaumātua and the responding to the growing demand for kaumātua housing, villages, and a way of being in the housing space. The intergenerational one is really interesting in the fact that some of our families are really struggling with the rents and our kaumātua are becoming really concerned about how they're being taken care of as well. So while we're looking at housing well, building well, we've now got to step outside that and start to take a different look particularly in the developments. A piece of work that Unanga is currently undertaking, another piece of research alongside that, is a new development that incorporates kaumātua housing, but wrapped around with home ownership, public housing, so whānau can live closely together, but also taking care of those needs for the whole whānau is where we're heading with this next piece. Sustaining well-being, that's also about feedback that we've had from kaumātua around their choices. You know, we're no longer looking at building one-bedroom units, so that as they age in place, the whānau, the caregiver, can actually support, and that saves us upheaving people and moving them to care facilities. So a choice of being able to age well in a supported environment. The other important learning is around self-management, particularly in our kaumātua villages. You know, the best people to manage themselves well is our kaumātua in our spaces. And I think that as a landlord, as a developer, and we've taken on board all of this feedback, and as we continue this work, we're learning with input upfront from our kaumātua. So that's an amazing journey that the Runanga has been on, particularly in partnership with the Rauawa, who provide the health and wellbeing support services. So if we're to say we're responding, we need to be listening. We need to not just be doing the doing. And those are probably the key messages from the work that we're currently doing and have done over many, many years. So, you know, a simple example is one of our queer who had been sleeping on a couch, for example, shared this story at a conference and said, you know, the day that she moved into her kaumātua home, she felt all of a sudden empowered. She felt that she had her autonomy back, and she felt that if she wanted to eat porridge for breakfast, she could do that. And even when her neighbours questioned her, she said, I'm just so happy I'm able to be me. So I just really wanted to kind of share that today, that, you know, these are our taonga, these are our whānau, that we really want to provide the best housing and wraparound supports for the rest of their lives. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Yvonne. Thank you for your whakaaro. Coming to you now, Troy. What can you tell us about retirement village living as a solution?
Yep, kia ora to you, Helen. Nice to meet you. In a nutshell, the answer to that question is yes, retirement village living is a solution for some of the older New Zealanders in New Zealand. And if I take that to the next statement, the some is predominantly European who are owner-occupiers or have a reasonable chunk of equity, and they're willing to forego the investment attraction on that capital, and they know themselves well enough to know that they would suit living in a commune type construct or shared living, shared amenity type of environment. And if they tick all those boxes, then yes, it's a very successful housing solution for those types of older people. And if I can break that down to 4 parts, firstly, there's the health and well-being aspect of retirement village living for those people who fit that rather restricted category that I started the chat with. We know that over 50% of the aged care beds in the country are now located, or co-located, I should say, on the same sites of retirement villages. And actually it was work that Kay and her colleague Bev did that helped us understand it. Interestingly, it's only a very small percentage of retirement village residents who end up in those care facilities, meaning that those care facilities are actually servicing people who are living out in the community in other types of accommodation. But the conclusion, which accords to what I see, having the privilege of getting around a lot of villages in the country, is that overwhelmingly for those people who do move into a retirement village, they are happy, and they then tend to live happier, healthier lives, and they're attracted by having access to care on site. So it's a win-win situation, again, for that rather narrow segment of the society for whom retirement village living is definitely a solution. Secondly, culture and ethnicity. The retirement village landscape is primarily very Eurocentric. You do have one or two villages that actually appeal to people from particular ethnicities. There are a couple, for example, there are a couple of villages that are for people of Dutch ancestry, but there's certainly, you would go a long way to find villages that had any noticeable populations of Maori, Pacific, Asian, Indian, or anything other than traditional Euro. The third part about retirement villages living is that they'll only be a solution for people who are prepared to accept the regulatory framework that retirement village living is offered in, and that means it's a consumer choice. So regardless of ethnicity, even if there were villages for all types of ethnicities, or that suited all types of ethnicities, I should say, 95% of the occupations in retirement village living are through a license arrangement, where a capital is paid and you forfeit a percentage of that capital at the end of your tenure over to the operator. So it's not a financial investment. It requires people to weigh up the opportunity cost of staying in a home or hanging on to investments that increase in value over time versus the intangible return of going into an environment that offers that sense of security, the sense of social connection, that sort of thing, not having to worry about maintenance of the home that they own, etc. So a very much a commercial construct of some of the things that Abbeyfield offers, but in a far more commercial and proprietal way. And then the final and probably the most relevant part of this is the financial means, because as I said, the model that we have in New Zealand only allows retirement village operators to offer accommodation to people through an occupation right agreement, and if they have capital to pay, whether in lump sums or installments or what have you. And Kay and Paul, I mentioned earlier how we've got a situation where we know that by around 2035 or 2040, half of the 65-year-olds will be renters. We know that an increasing number of people are hitting the age of 65 now with mortgages. So even of that small segment that I started the chat with, who are the ones who could become retirement village residents, that segment in the long term seems to be diminishing. So the long-term sustainability of retirement villages with the current model that it's using puts a flag out there. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the final segment, Helen, but just the Residential Tenancies Act is quite clearly stated in the Act not to apply to retirement village living. And I found that in 2019, of the approximately 32 to 35,000 retirement village units that were out there, only 500 were being offered on a quasi-rental type of basis in 50 different villages around the country. Perhaps just to wind up the thing, I would say, through my friends at the Retirement Villages Association, which is the membership organisation for most of the operators of villages in the country, I'm told that at least half of their residents in their villages do rely on superannuation for their discretionary income means, which is unusual given that one of the big attractions about choosing a village, again, if you have that equity to begin with, is about releasing that equity, perhaps having some to supplement your super and having an enjoyable lifestyle. And yet half of the people in villages rely on super. And our monitoring report that we did just last year showed that 40% at least of villages have some form of loan arrangement that the operator has had to provide to a few of the residents in each of their village. So, already there are just little hints that the long-term sustainability of retirement village modelling as it currently is weighed against the other demographic trends that our other speakers have talked about, just raise a flag, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on.
Magic. Thank you, Troy, for that kōrero as well. Look, what I was going to suggest, Troy, is that I come straight back to you in just a couple of seconds.
Sure.
And we'll back up the speaking line with that final question where our panel will give us a couple of minutes, if possible, for their response on that question. What I just wanted to make a plea to our fantastic attendees at this session, there's 4 pages of you, there's 80 of us online here, is I'm really committed to giving at least 5 or 10 minutes at the end for people to ask questions. So folks, if you'd like to type a question into the chat function of Zoom, I can pick the question up there. Or if you'd simply like to do a reaction on screen, there's a little reaction button down the bottom there on the left of the leave button. If you just want to react like what I'm doing now with a thumbs up like that, I know that you want to ask a question, or you could do the clap your hand, you know, that little function there. If you want to do that, I'll know. If we can't get through all the questions here today, I'll do the best that I can to pick up the written ones, and we might be able to do a feedback loop. I'll see what we can do there. So that's the plan, folks. Yep, there's some thumbs going up. Fantastic. Troy, back to you for this final question, which is, what do we need to do to secure positive housing futures for today's and tomorrow's older people? Over to you.
Right. Well, I'll take it from the retirement village perspective and the role that the commission I work for, which is has under the retirement village regime, which is about monitoring the effects of that act, its regs and the code. Ultimately, we have to ensure that the framework enables the operators who have the capital and develop these facilities for older people, have that freedom and to innovate and offer occupation on a variety of terms. So currently the model supports, like I said, 95% of the modelling supports a licensing arrangement. The other 5% usually involves an arrangement with an actual interest in a unit title, but they are becoming rarer. So our friends in Australia have a greater range of options from what I've seen. They have a higher number of rentals, a higher number of leasing options, a greater variety of smaller amounts of capital at the front end, or larger amounts of capital at the front end, and smaller annual or weekly fees, and different calculations of exit repayments that potentially give some residents a share of capital gain. Far more diversity, it seems, over there. Our framework, which is very highly regarded from a consumer protection point of view, I should say, it may be something that we need to do to look at how well it enables operators to offer innovation.
Awesome, Troy. Thank you. Yvonne, coming to you next. Secure positive housing futures for today and tomorrow's older people. What do we need to do, Yvonne?
I've just noted 5 very key things that I believe are really valuable. One is to listen, carefully listen to what the needs are. Secondly is to understand what is being said from our older people and involve them in the design, implementation phases and management phases. Also, we really need government to invest in innovative ways of responding to the needs of older people's housing. So, yeah, and the other one is action.
Kia ora, Yvonne. Thank you for that tidy summary. Paul, over to you.
Sorry, just unmuting there. Look, yeah, I mean, I guess I can't point it in what I was saying before to a couple of things that, you know, are really needed. And I guess perhaps just not to talk about renting for a minute, but the future, the long-term future for people's housing will be, we'll need to continue to invest in good quality, progressive, supported home ownership schemes as well. And it's been really exciting to see some developments just started recently that can hopefully build on the experience we've had, because people who are in that grey area between owning a home or renting, that can really help. So I'd really like to push that as an important platform for housing. But I want to come back to, and I think the other panelists have indicated too, that need for our settings and policies to allow a variety of responses to really work and to be invested in. Troy's already said how hard it is to make the retirement village model work, the constraints it's under. And we see that across lots of different models, that you come across all sorts of constraints that we really need to work at trying to figure out how to get past those, for instance, so that Pacifica housing solutions can be developed that really work for Pacifica elders and for all their communities. So I can't not say that we have to focus on adequate income for people. That's what gives people choice in the rental market, in the housing market, and older people's incomes, along with those nearing retirement. We need to make sure that we are not leaving a whole bunch of people behind whose choices will be inherently limited by the lack of financial resources.
Ngā mihi, Paul, thank you. We're going to go to Susan next, and then Scott and Kay. We're going to do that all in 3 minutes.
Right.
Over to you, Susan.
All right, well, look, I'll be really simple. What we would need to provide more Abbeyfield houses in New Zealand is access to affordable development capital. So to build a house, we can raise a mortgage for about a quarter of the cost. We've always carried out local fundraising, but the thing that would really make the difference to us would be affordable capital, probably sourced through central government. It's worked in the past, and I think, as I said before, it would actually save the taxpayer money spent in other areas. So yeah, I'll keep it to that because it's that simple, but not that easy.
Thank you, Susan. Scott, over to you.
Look, thanks, Helen, and to all my colleagues here, just to tautoko to everything that everyone's saying here. So I'm just adding weight to Susan's and Troy's korero and Paul's here. That look, I think if the return that we expect from investment in older persons is driven by well-being, not by a purely financial return, that's the heart of the difference between the retirement village model and how it's funded currently that Troy was talking about, and I think what the community housing sector delivery models are doing. So if we can make that pivot and have it become standard practice that we're investing for the well-being outcome rather than for the dollar return, we're at a point in history where money is cheaper than it has ever been in my lifetime. And getting near the retirement age myself, that's I think that's saying something. So let's use this generational opportunity that we have to actually crack this nut on its head. Kia ora.
And kia ora to you, Scott. Dr. Saville-Smith, you have the final panel word before we go to questions.
Thanks to all my colleagues on the panel and to you also, Helen. I just want to reinforce Yvonne's point. Enabling people to make decisions about their housing solutions means listening to them about what they need and going below what they say, because often people will say things that they think are acceptable. But when you really listen and talk with people, it then emerges what people's real needs are. And that's particularly true with older people who often want to just be seen to be reasonable and accept their lot and so forth. So actually exploring with people what they want, what they need. And there's 3 things that I think that will increase seniors' agency. Firstly, that they need to not only have choice around stock and the sort of dwellings that are available, but also the ability to make those choices. And that often means giving them pathways into understanding what's available, but also where it's located and how they're going to pay for it and all of that sort of thing. I often hear from people that the solution for older people's housings is retirement villages. And we know that that's not true. And we've got to knock those sorts of narratives on the head. There are numerous housing solutions that older people can explore. but they need to have that ability and access to that information, and they need to be able to turn that exploitation into real action. And to do that, we need to actually invest in long-term housing pathways for young people right through to seniors. And that means that we need to not just see housing as a financial asset, but as a public good, as part of our ordinary infrastructure for our society and our people. And the final thing is just to pick up, which is a sort of well, two things, little area, sort of micro. One is we need to sort out the rental market, and we really need to sort out the rental market. And I think the reforms are a small step to doing that, but it actually doesn't resolve our problems within the rental market. And the second thing that we need to do is that we need to actually make sure our design and the builds that we make in the new build are functional and accessible.
Kia ora, Kay. Thank you for rounding up the panel, and a big, huge thank you to my colleagues on the panel here for a pretty fast and furious panel discussion, but we got a lot of rich detail there, so thank you. I can see 3 questions. I've got one here from Pauline Grogan, I've got one from Aisha, Lanita, and there's just one popped up here. Troy, I think, Troy, you're answering the question that Pauline has posed. Is that right? You've put a comment up there, Troy.
Yes, I did. I've probably misinterpreted it coming into me directly. Yeah, but yeah, I did post a comment.
Magic. Thanks for that, Troy. Look, I'm going to come to Aisha's question. And again, folks, if we don't get to your question in the next few minutes, I'll find a way where we can generate some response back to you offline. So Aisha, you've asked, one of the panelists mentioned that the residents of Abbeyfield don't have to worry about daily food shopping, etc. How's the choice needs of residents met in these shared houses? And what if the residents want to participate in the meal planning or shopping, etc.? Susan, can I give that one over to you?
Yeah, sure. That's that kind of thing is handled in different ways in different ones of the houses, Aisha. Sometimes everyone gets a chance to choose a meal a week that the others also have that is prepared, their favourite meal. Sometimes it's a particular day when they have that choice. We have regular meetings with the residents to get their feedback on whether the meals are the kind of things they like. And of course, special dietary needs are also catered for within that.
Magic, thank you. And look, we do have time for another question. Lanita Russell, thanks for your question here. Many older people have cognitive impairment and or dementia, yet we see little effort to build dementia-friendly, which are also age-friendly communities. How can these initiatives become a standard part of housing solutions for older people? If any one of my panelist colleagues just want to put their hand up, and I'll defer that question. Yep, Kay, you've got this one. Awesome, go for it.
Yeah, I think this is absolutely a critical part of universal and accessible functional design of dwellings, and the fact that we do not recognise that in our legislation as a problem. We often see universal design as around mobility, but it's also about people's cognitive abilities. And the reality is that many people that have cognitive compromise live within their houses. And there's an enormous amount of research and experience overseas and indeed here to some extent, but it's not codified, which shows you how people can live better in their houses, even if they're struggling a little bit with their decision making, their cognitive condition and so forth. So cognitive and sensory are both areas where universal design can work really, really well.
Jack, thank you for that, Kay. Nina, I want to acknowledge your question. You've asked here about circadian lighting in retirement villages. If I could kindly ask that I take notice on that, because we are on 11 a.m, but I want to acknowledge that question's there, and I think that we might be able to send you something fairly quickly on that. Also, Pauline and Troy, I think you've made a connection there. That's fantastic. I can't see any other questions there or any hands up. It is 11 o'clock, so at this point I think it's appropriate to say a big, huge mihi thank you to my panelist colleagues. Thank you to everybody that's joined us at this particular webinar, and hand back to you, Greg, to see us out of this panel.
Sure.
Kia ora, Helen. I have to say that was absolutely fantastic to sit here and listen to the acumen with this phenomenal panel, I should say, and of course your extremely able leadership as we've gone through here. So kia ora moto mahi I tēnei rā I tō kōrero. Loved it, absolutely loved it, and I think our audience will have loved that as well. And of course, at this particular point, it gives us the opportunity now to take the learning that we've had over the course of this hour and discuss it. So we're going to be moving through into a series of breakout sessions now. The great thing about this is there's very little you'll need to do because we're going to be pushing you into various different groups, 4 in total, and we are also going to have 4 facilitators in each of those sessions as well. So looking forward to that. So we have Stephanie Clare, Louise Rees, Sally Heppenstall and Lara Fleetstra. They will be looking after those particular sessions. So for the next 30 minutes, enjoy some robust conversation, and we'll look to having you back in the main room as we move into the next of our phases, which will be, of course, the Let's End Loneliness website launch, and we'll get to that at the appropriate time. So at this particular moment, we would like you to accept the invitation to move into the various breakout rooms, and we will get ourselves underway. Thanks, folks. We'll see you at the close of the next half hour. Cheers. Oh, kia ora whānau. Nice to have you all back as we're getting underway. So I believe that our breakout sessions have all essentially come to a close at this particular point in time. Well, I'd like to say a big thank you at this point to a range of people, actually, before we move into the next of our sessions, particularly to our 4 breakout facilitators, I should say, who have done a fabulous job for us there. Stephanie Clare, Louise Rees, Sally Heppenstall, and Lara Fleetstra. So thank you very, very much indeed, and certainly hope that there was a wide-ranging discussion that happened in your breakout room. We move through to the next session here, and I'm going to invite Stephanie Clare to join us at this particular point as we move into the launch of the Let's End Loneliness website. So looking forward to that very much indeed. I will pass us through now to Stephanie Clare.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Greg. And actually, it's a nice little lead-in, because one of the things we talked about in that group was about connectivity, or connecting with neighbours. So I'm very, very proud to be here today to talk about our Let's End Loneliness launch, our website of our organisations who gather together to make a difference to everybody in New Zealand, not just older people, not just younger people, not just middle-aged people. So today I'm going to go through exactly what we're doing and how you can join us end loneliness. So a growing research now shows that loneliness and social isolation are factors for serious physical, mental and cognitive health issues, and increased use of formal health services. Actually, you're more likely to go into care if you're lonely. Coupled with the rapid growth of our over 65 population, this evidence is stimulating interest in New Zealand and overseas potential role of communities, not-for-profit organisations to provide social connection that will support people to live well, age well, in place. So examples from around the world in the UK, and even within our own organisations, we want to show policymakers, funders, other organisations and the public how to do this, how to be inspired, how to mobilise and reduce loneliness in older age across New Zealand, and actually at your local level. Whilst various organisations are making valuable contributions, there are currently no overarching initiatives that drive to reduce loneliness nationally for our older people. Just exactly what I'm about to show you. That's it, perfect. So who are we? Why? So we are the New Zealand Coalition to End Loneliness. We're 7 founding organisations that we work together in different ways to bring people together. Age Concern New Zealand, Alzheimer's New Zealand, Carers New Zealand, the Royal New Zealand RSA, Salvation Army, St John's, and the Student Volunteer Army. You've probably all heard about us all. Did you know we do all stuff very similar to each other? We all meet the needs of our community. We were formed as a coalition in 2018 because we know we wanted to solve the social problem like loneliness, and it can't be done by one person in one organisation. So we were committed to working together to end loneliness. So we wanted to grow the understanding of loneliness and make it easier to talk about. We know there's stigma out there. Provide clear information about what we're all about to do to tackle loneliness, and together provide prompt action on loneliness at a government level. So our plan to end loneliness was to talk about it, to gather together, to talk about our family, our whānau, our communities, and our workplaces. We wanted to research loneliness, and we want to know what works and how to do more of it. We want to know what the government is saying about this, and we want to make sure that you know how to get involved. So let's talk about loneliness. If you are feeling lonely, if you are feeling it's tough at the moment, if you're glad that you'll want to have some information, if you need to have some information and you know you need to step forward, you can step forward and make it a plan and change your situation. So this website will give you somewhere to go. And it's about how we can help each other. It's about how you can help yourself. So feeling lonely is something that most of us experience during our lives, either briefly or for a longer time. Loneliness can be painful. It can be distressing. And it happens when you feel we don't have enough relationships, when we don't have relationships that meet our needs, when we don't have someone to talk to. But loneliness is different from social isolation. If we are isolated, alone, sometimes we don't feel lonely. We've got connections. Sometimes we feel lonely when we're amongst people, a huge crowd. We can feel lonely. So loneliness happens to us all. And in New Zealand, 16.5% of people over the age of 15 feel lonely at least sometime in their life. Loneliness can result as a change of your environment. Moving to a new area where you don't know people, moving house, moving suburbs, losing a job, having a baby, changing your environment, retirement, retiring, bereavement. There are so many different things that can change how we think about things and can put us in a situation we might be lonely. But whatever the cause, it's okay. If we feel lonely, it's important to do something about it. That's what we've done. We've done something about it. Being connected to others helps us survive. Just like thirst or hunger, loneliness is a cue that we need something to take care of ourselves. If we don't, then it may damage our health. So researchers say, and we know this, that loneliness is bad for your health. We've always talked about it being worse than moderately smoking, and it can be more harmful than obesity and a lack of exercise. So over the past decade, we've increased our focus in the research space, policymakers, and our media on loneliness. That's good, because we want to tackle it. We want to address this. We want to do something about it. So joining today, you can learn how to do something about it. You can help us, help everybody, help yourself. So on this website, we've got a number of activities. We've got a number of parts you can connect for yourselves, for your communities, and for your workplace. So together, we can end loneliness, one person, one community, and one workplace at a time. So how can you get help? On this website, we've got lots of contact numbers. So those contacts will give you someone to talk to, because one size does not fit all. We might need a different group of people to talk to. We might need someone who has a similar background, who has a similar story, who we feel connected to. So sometimes though, we do need to talk to somebody. If your feelings and situation are overwhelming, any of these organisations, any of these people are ready to listen and help. So you can find some information here. So the key things I want you to know is that anyone can feel lonely. In a busy place, in a lonely place, anyone can feel lonely. That actually, this is solvable. This is one of the few things we can fix. We can fix this because we can do this together. So this website is the connector that we have started the push to do. So I want you to join this movement with me to end loneliness. I want New Zealand to be a place that we have got social connections that thrive. In our breakout group, we talked about neighbourhoods. Neighbourhoods are key. Workplaces are key. Individuals are key. So but what can you do? How can you get involved? So we've developed this website to raise awareness on loneliness, to ask you, your community and your workplace to join us, to add your stories, to get resources, to grow the coalition, to make New Zealand a place we're proud to be connected, where we thrive. Here are things that you can do. You can learn more about this from our website. You can join the coalition, just click join. You can subscribe to our newsletter, or you can contact us. We have stickers, we have information that you can get. So just give us a call, send us an email. We want you to have the information that you need to be able to reduce loneliness, reduce the stress and the loneliness out there. So thank you so much to our founding coalition members for making this happen. Without us all gathering together, being honest and open to ask that question, can we do something together? And we wouldn't be here today. Thank you for your insight, your passion, your commitment, and your great desire for this mihi in New Zealand. Also, thank you to the Health Promotion Agency for making this part of it possible, because without that, we wouldn't have got that final push. We need everybody to give us a hand here, to give every neighbour a hand, to give every person a hand, to give every family a hand. This is how we can connect. So thank you so much for your thoughts, energy and support today. Please take a look at this website. If you've got any comments, come back to us through the website or any one of our partners, and you can find them on the website. Thank you for listening.
There we go. Trap for young players. Kia ora, Stephanie. Thank you very, very much indeed. Look, it happens to the even the professionals doing this. Technical challenges, they do happen from time to time. And what I want to do is, I was looking for that website and I wasn't necessarily seeing it. So I was wondering if I might just throw this up here for the moment and see if there's anything I can just roll through very briefly there in that site. For us as well. So that's the site there, letsendloneliness.co.nz. Feel free to get in there and have a good look around. There's some great tools, some great stories in there as well. So feel free to have a good look through the site there. And what a fantastic initiative as well. Huge thanks, obviously, to all of the people involved in creating this as an opportunity. So Stephanie, thank you also for your leadership in this space as well. Let me just get back and place myself back on screen there. It's a really wonderful thing to be part of this webinar series, and really have to say a big thank you indeed to a wide range of people. I think we should obviously thank our sponsors, particularly our gold sponsor who's looking after this particular webinar, that's Aging Well National Science Challenge, and also our sponsors, Perpetual Guardian, Ryman Healthcare, and the Selwyn Institute as well. Big thanks again to our very able chair for our panel session that we've just had, Helen Potiki, and our panelists, Dr. Kay Saville-Smith, Scott Figenshow, Susan Jenkins, Paul Barber, Yvonne Wilson, and Troy Churton. Really appreciate you giving us your time to be able to discuss these very important issues here in this space. Again, thanks to our facilitators for the breakout sessions, Stephanie Clare, Louise Rees, Sally Heppenstall, Lara Fleischner, and also, of course, to you, our participants, our attendees, because without you, it wouldn't be much of a party. And we certainly hope that you've enjoyed coming and joining us here in the webinar. Of course, this is not happening in a vacuum. We have a wide range of webinars lining up all the way through October. And I'll just outline some of the stuff that is coming up for you as well. So the 15th of October, which of course is next week, is webinar 3. Professor Vanessa Burholt is talking around technology, mediated communication in familiar relationships and its influence on isolation and loneliness. And alongside Vanessa, we have Dr. Macarena Dudley, Māori and Mate Wareware, update on a Māori diagnostic tool called Mana and a Māori-friendly phone app for whānau. The following week, 22nd of October, is webinar 4, and included in the webinar is a panel discussion, which is Taking a Breath, Reflections on COVID-19. And I know this is going to be extremely well participated in because we have John Parsons, who is our facilitator for that, Dr. Judy Blakey, Dr. Ashley Bloomfield, Murray Aldridge, and Simon Wallace. So and again, loving the quality of our panels and our speakers here in these sessions. And then the 29th of October is our final one, and that is webinar 5. It's a student event, Meet the Academics, Professor Deborah Waters, writing for publication, and Andy Towers with Imposter Syndrome in Academia. That old imposter syndrome, eh? Just rears its head in every single area. So let's have a look at where we are. We are 9 minutes away from midday right now. And of course, we have an opportunity now. If you would like to discuss things amongst yourselves, to do a little bit of networking, now would be a really good opportunity. We'll be closing the webinar system down at midday. Again, huge thank you to all those people who've made this webinar happen. And a big thanks to Multimedia as well, who's been in the background doing some really lovely work for us too. So really appreciate your efforts there, as well as our teams from Age Concern New Zealand and the New Zealand Association of Gerontology. So thank you very, very much indeed. So I'm going to go back and show you that website again so you can see the website URL, and it's just here. Let me, I have to do a little bit of it. Oh no, I'll go. Here we go. I'll do this little transition thing here, and then I can actually show you the website URL, and it's right there. So if you look at the top of that screen there, you'll see letsendloneliness.co.nz. And if we can even make that just a little bit more apparent, I think that's probably about there. There we go. letsendloneliness.co.nz. So just remember, it's a .co.nz. So if you're thinking it's not a company, well, it's under the .co.nz regime. So that's where you will find it there. So feel free to head across there at any particular point and just browse, roam through that. So this will conclude the official portion of our webinar right here today. Thank you for joining us, and feel free to just join us here on screen if you like. Unmute, unhide your videos if you like, and if you'd like to stick around and have a chat, feel free to do so. If you want to head away and get into your day, again, feel free to do that as well. Thanks once again. My name's Greg Ward. It's been my absolute pleasure to be joining you here for this webinar session here today. Have a fantastic week. Cheers. Kia ora.